Clyde is a tinkerer. His daughter followed in his footsteps by making a bracelet for him, and she is now making one for Mommy. Clyde's wife asks him to open the door. When he does, he is knocked down and two burglars break into the house. They bind Clyde's hands and plunder the residence. Darby, one of the robbers, says, "You can't fight fate," and stabs Clyde. Darby's accomplice, Rupert, attempts to flee but is only instructed to shut up. Clyde is forced to witness his wife's rape and murder, and when his small daughter arrives, she is not immune to the same destiny. Nick, a career-minded prosecutor, chats to his colleague about the Clyde case. The situation escalated yesterday night after a judge declared that DNA from the crime site was inadmissible. Instead of going to trial, he chose to accept a plea deal. He is not taking any chances, stating, "Some justice is better than no justice at all." Nick meets with Clyde, who gives him notes that he believes will aid with the case. Nick sets the notes aside and announces that Darby has consented to testify against Rupert, who will face the death penalty. Darby will be sentenced to up to 5 years in jail. Clyde is in amazement, having already been emotionally traumatized. He begs Nick not to accept the offer, but it has already been determined. That is how the justice system operates. It's not about what you know, but what you can prove, Nick adds, spitting in Clyde's face. In court, the entire affair was arranged as if Rupert was the primary perpetrator. Darby gently mocks Nick's wife, as if she is next, and signs the plea agreement. Outside, Nick speaks to the press about the decision, and Darby sarcastically thanks him for being in his corner. It's nice when the system works, Nick observes from a distance, still surprised by how unjust everything is. After a long day at work, Nick returns home to his wife Kelly, and to ease his tensions, talks to his daughter in her stomach. Nick's daughter has grown up 10 years later, but he remains as busy as ever. He has to miss his daughter's school recital once more, and Kelly is upset that he is so preoccupied with his work. Today is the day Rupert will be executed by lethal injection, and Nick is present with his coworker Sarah. He observes the execution rather than his daughter's recital. Rupert's final words were that he was not to blame for the deaths of Clyde's family. That does not set well with Sarah and Nick. Rupert is injected with 3 medicines in a specified sequence. Instead of dying painlessly, he begins to shake and scream in agony, eventually dying. "Bravo! What a great show," the warden says, explaining that they are not to blame for the man's misery, because it has never occurred before. A police officer arrives and delivers the prosecutors a bottle with the words, "Can't fight fate," inscribed on it. Nick understands this term, and the police investigate Darby and locate his whereabouts. Darby, who is sniffing flour, gets a call. The muffled voice reveals everything there is to know about him. Darby develops paranoia. The voice orders him to peek out the window, and he sees cops approaching from all sides. Darby rushes outside and fires a few rounds at the police vehicles. He receives another phone from the muffled voice, informing him that if he wants to stay out of prison, he must surrender the gun and proceed to the abandoned factory. Darby does what he is told. Fortunately, on his way there, he discovers an officer sleeping in his car. He gets inside, grabs his rifle, and orders him to drive. They arrive to a deserted location. Darby brings him out and tells him to get on his knees, but first he takes a call and discovers that his rescuer is none other than Clyde himself. Darby attempts to shoot him, but it is a trap gun instead. He is injected with a paralyzing serum but stays aware. In other words, Darby is unable to move but can feel everything. Clyde then restrains him in his warehouse and warns Darby that he will experience suffering like he has never felt before. He has taken all necessary steps to postpone his death for as long as possible. Before beginning the torture, Clyde informs him that he understands what it is like to be powerless, exactly as he was 10 years ago. "You can't fight fate." He starts the tape and begins dismembering Darby. Nick and Sarah discuss tampering with fatal injections. Nick believes Darby had nothing to do with it, since he lacks the mental capacity to pull it off. A short time later, the cops discover Darby in 25 pieces. They notify Nick about the terrible scene. Sarah realizes that the only person with a purpose is Clyde. He has sold all of his holdings in recent years, purchasing houses in unusual locations. He also owns the warehouse where Darby was discovered. The cops are on their way to Clyde's residence, where he is quietly undressing when he hears the siren. They surround his house, and Clyde welcomes them enthusiastically but nude. He is arrested, and on his way to the car, he gives Nick a threatening look. They discover law books and a torn-out piece of newspaper in Clyde's home, on which Nick and Darby clasp hands. Clyde is handcuffed in a jail interview chamber. Unfortunately, there is no evidence against him, so they can only hope for a confession. Nick's daughter receives a recording of what was supposed to be her performance and asks her mother to see it, but she declines, stating they will watch it with her father. Nick's daughter quietly inserts the DVD. Clyde is cutting up Darby, not her presentation. Nicholas confronts Clyde. He switches off the live feed and acts as if Clyde did the right thing. Clyde admits, in a roundabout way, that he wanted to kill Darby and Rupert, and had been thinking about how to do so. Nick sees this as his confession and begins to go, but Clyde stops him, gently describing Nick's daily routine and instructing him to sit down. Despite Nick's assertion that they are done here, Clyde claims that anything he told him is inadmissible, because he never expressly stated that he killed someone, and is aware that they have no proof. Even though Darby was discovered dead in Clyde's warehouse, Clyde owns a number of properties across the country, and can claim it was a setup. Nick claims they know he did it, but it's not all what you know. It's about what you can demonstrate. Clyde promises to give Nick his complete confession if he can do anything for him. Clyde desires a bed, and Nick's ego gets the best of him. No, Nick's boss, Jonas, chastises him for rejecting the offer. A confession for a mattress when there is no evidence is quite excellent. Nick is convinced that Clyde is messing with them. Jonas once again advises him to proceed with the transaction. Clyde gets the mattress he wants. Someone is already considering leaving prison. Nick asks in court that Clyde's bail be denied. In his defense, he claims to be a law-abiding citizen, and Nick has no proof to justify his detention without bail. The judge is likely to agree with Clyde. Nick claims that Clyde agreed to deliver his full confession, but did not. At that point, Clyde begins to applaud, stating that she would simply let a murderer go after offering her some lovely lines. Is this true? Everyone is taken aback as he berates the judge several more times for being missiled before being let out. Bail was rejected. Later in the interrogation room, Clyde characterizes the tape he provided him as good triumphs over evil, and, as promised, acknowledges that he was on it. He goes on to claim that he has one more confession to make, but he expects something in exchange. Nick is sick of hearing his BS. Clyde mentions wanting a 20-ounce medium-rare steak and an iPod for lunch in prison. Before Nick leaves, Clyde offers him Bill Reynolds' life as a confession. Bill was Darby's attorney. Nick returns and Sarah reports that Bill has been absent for 3 days. Clyde speaks into the camera, addressing Nick and saying that if he wants Bill to live, he must meet his conditions tomorrow at 1 p.m. The following day, the steak is delivered to prison, but 5 minutes before 1 p.m., the warden chooses to double-check the prosecutors when they arrive at Clyde's with the meal. They are 8 minutes late. He retains his cool and informs them where Bill is. He also informs them that the 1 p.m. appointment was not for him, but for Bill, so they should hurry. Nick hurries to a chopper, and they fly to the site while Clyde listens to his iPod and eats steak with his cellmate, who had previously threatened him. They rapidly become good friends, but it's all a ruse by Clyde, who was wanted the T-bone off the steak. He turns up the music and hands the remote to his cellmate to distract him while stabbing him in the neck. The guards arrive at Clyde's cell, and the warden is furious. Nick discovered Bill buried wearing an oxygen mask. He's dead. It took them 15 minutes to get there from the prison, so if Clyde had had his lunch on time, Bill would still be alive. Sarah sends Nick a message informing him that Clyde murdered his cellmate and that the warden is transferring him to solitary. Nick pays a visit to Clyde in his solitary incarceration, questioning why he is killing so many people. Clyde wants to hold everyone accountable for their actions. Nick hands Clyde his daughter's bracelet and wonders if his family would be pleased of his pursuing retribution in their name, but his wife and daughter are no longer alive to feel anything. Nick and Jonas meet a federal official who knows more about Clyde. He claims that Clyde is a natural tactician who murders people without even being in the same room with them. If Clyde is in prison, it means he chose to be there. He did not kill his cellmate at random. He removed a pawn off the board. He advises that they look for the next piece. The official informs Nick that the only way to stop Clyde is to walk into his cell and shoot him in the head, because he can't stop him if he targets everyone involved in his family's case. He goes saying, "If Clyde wants you dead, you're dead." Nick and Jonas approach the judge with this evidence, requesting that Clyde's civil rights be violated and visitation be restricted in order to protect everyone's safety. She agrees and signs the document. Her cell phone calls, and as she answers, it explodes. They're shocked. Nick goes to see Clyde in an interrogation room at the prison. He asks him about his collaborator and the purpose of this vengeance. Clyde becomes enraged because Nick continues to be perplexed by the situation. If he sought vengeance, he would have killed his family during the last 10 years. Clyde offers Nick one more chance. Free him by 6 a.m. or everyone will perish. Clyde is escorted to maximum solitary by several guards. Nick and Sarah meet at a prison and search through paperwork for any clues as to who is assisting Clyde from the outside, but without success. Sarah begins to question whether their decision to accept the arrangement with Darby at the time was correct. Nick reassures her that it was. The DA staff stays until 6 a.m., after which Nick sends everyone home to rest. When Sarah starts her car, the bombs tied to the automobiles detonate, killing everyone, including her. Nick is confident that someone is assisting Clyde while he remains in prison. 6 officers were killed. Nick and Jonas meet the mayor, who cannot believe how one arrested man can cause so much havoc. She assigns 2 security guards. Nick takes his family to a safe spot and calls it a vacation. No credit cards, cell phones, or anything that could reveal their position. When Nick returns inside, he discovers the framed newspaper item, which indicates that someone has been in his home. Back in the prison, Clyde is released for a walk and greeted by Nick and the detective. Nick beats Clyde out of rage, who just responds that it's fine that he's angry. He's only warming up. The investigator draws his revolver, but Nick stops him. According to Clyde, Nick will be witnessing something biblical. At Sarah's burial, Jonas believes they brought this on themselves, while Nick remains convinced they did the right thing but is beginning to doubt himself. As they drive away, a man in black controls a military drone equipped with a machine gun, an EMP, and a rocket launcher. He disables the cars, bringing them to a standstill. Jonas' car is peppered with anti-tank shells, and he blows it up to ensure his death. The mayor can't believe Nick let this go on for so long. She wants to remove him, but to ease media pressure, she appoints him as the next district attorney. The mayor of Philadelphia has issued an emergency order to lock down the entire city. No one is permitted to travel freely within it. Nick receives an email from Sarah's contact regarding real estate that Clyde purchased. He compiles a list of all properties sold in Philadelphia during the last decade and analyzes the sales prices. Nick discovers that Clyde owns a tiny garage not far from the prison. He and the detective meet to inspect the garage. They discover a hole in the floor, which is a tunnel excavated by Clyde that leads directly beneath the prison. Clyde entered every single cell, which is why he killed his cellmate. That was his plan all along. The investigator checks Clyde's cell, but he is not present. Clyde, disguised as a janitor, sneaks past security and inside City Hall via light check. The investigator and Nick track down Clyde thanks to cameras everywhere, including Nick's home, and a remark from von Clausewitz regarding the case's center of gravity, City Hall. Clyde plants a napalm device to assassinate the mayor, who is about to hold a security meeting. Nick and a detective come shortly after. As a precaution, they must move silently so as not to notify Clyde that they are watching him. They notice Clyde's automobile on the 5th level, right below the meeting room. They uncover a suitcase, which they believe contains the explosive. The bomb squad member opens the bag and says the explosive is activated by a cell phone and might go off at any time. Some operatives sent to monitor Clyde's warehouse detect him approaching and alert Nick. Clyde returns to his equipment in the tunnel and watches the conference begin. He grabs his cell phone and climbs to it. Nick catches Clyde off guard in his cell. He carries a gun and asks Clyde to do the right thing, allowing him to escape. Clyde inquires if he has come to make one final bargain. Nick believes he finally understands what Clyde has been trying to tell him all along. I do not make deals with murderers. Nick warns him not to do it, since it is a decision he will have to live with for the rest of his life. Clyde apologizes and contacts the number. Nick exits, explaining that by the rest of his life, he meant about 25 seconds. As the investigator closes the tunnel entrance, Nick places the bomb-laden suitcase beneath Clyde's bed. He takes one last glimpse at his daughter's jewelry before his cell catches fire and explodes. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to watch more videos like this.